Lead me to some soul today. Oh, teach me, Lord, just what to say. Friends of mine are lost in sin and cannot find their way.
Welcome, everyone, to episode number 83 of a series of episodes that we're calling Leading Others to Christ. Those of you that have been listening and watching, you know what the format here is, what we try to do. But just for those that maybe are watching for the first time, what we try to do during these episodes, it's going to be focused on evangelism. One of our goals, and we have several, but it's to stir people up, to stir them up, as the Hebrew writer says, to love and good works, but especially in the area of reaching our family and friends with the gospel of Christ. My name is Dan Barker, and I'm one of the evangelists here at the Vestavia Church of Christ in Vestavia Hills, Alabama, which is just a little south of Birmingham. And those of you that know me, you know that I'm passionate about our subject. And I have been ever since I obeyed the gospel when I was 21 years old in Owensboro, Kentucky. And since then, I've always been striving to use some Bible phrases, to teach others, to sow the seed, to be a fisher of men and women, of course, to make disciples, to persuade men and women, and to teach. What I spend so much time on is teaching others how to teach others. And remembering what Paul said to Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:2, and the things that you've heard from me among many witnesses, commit these to faithful men and women who will be able to teach others also. And then later on in that same chapter, he there talks to Timothy about being useful for the master for every good work. So back when COVID was going on, we came up with this idea of a podcast, and where we would identify the Christians around the country, and eventually we're going to go outside the country, but to find those men and women that are involved in doing this, that are involved in leading others to Christ, find out who they are, where they are, how are they doing it, how are they setting up studies, what's the congregation doing, just what's the mindset of what's going on there where they are worshiping. And so that's the background of this podcast. But we're thrilled to death today to have our guest today is David Halbrook, from, of all places, I have to tease him a little bit, from Fairbanks, Alaska. Welcome, David.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, I was teasing him earlier. It's not cold. You're not cold, are you?
We had a little rain last night, so it's cool, but we're not in snowy season, not at all.
Well, that's good. That's good. Well, if you get too cold or anything, raise your hand or something. We'll take a break.
No problem.
But we're just thrilled to death that you were able to take the time and thank your wife, Starla, because you've got 3 little ones or 4.
That's right.
3 little ones. Okay. And to be able to squeeze us in here with all the activities that you have there at home. But we're so excited. David, I think I told you this when we were setting this up, with you being the 83rd one that we've interviewed. It's been fascinating what we've learned and all of the things that are going on out there. And there's a lot of things that are not going on too, that we're trying to encourage people to do. But let's start out with this. I call it the elevator pitch or the short bio. I know a lot of people know who David Halbrook is, but there's those that don't. Tell everybody, kind of bring us up to speed. For example, where were you born? How old were you when you obeyed the gospel? Who taught you? And where are you now? Just kind of bring us up to speed, if you would.
Sure. I'm 46 years old, and I've been married since 2010. And my wife Starla Page, and then we have 3 children. Joel is 10, Esther is 8, and Eliel, Eliel, is 4. I took my boys' names from the group of David's mighty men in the Old Testament. So that's where Joel and unusual name Eliel, that's where those come from.
Cool. That's good. That's good.
So I've got my army of two, and then my Esther, which Esther means little star. So that was about as
Oh,
close to Starla Junior as we would go. So all of our
wow.
names have a little story behind those.
I love that. So
So
you were, where were you born?
I was born in Nashville, Tennessee, and
Oh,
moved around a little bit. My father is an evangelist, Ron Halbrook, and so we moved around a little bit when I was younger, but spent most of my childhood in West Columbia, Texas, which is on the Gulf Coast, about an hour south of Houston, and did not did not grow up knowing I wanted to preach for sure. Just wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, so I studied to be a speech therapist, and after I graduated in the winter of 2000, I did that for about 2 years, and then that gave me some time to grow up and feel comfortable in working through decisions, and so in 2002, I decided I wanted to preach and visited a couple of churches, and so I began doing the work of an evangelist on a full-time basis in 2003. I've been preaching for about 20 years.
all right. Well, that's really good. That helps a lot. I didn't know that you were born in Nashville, and um, but uh, I think that's no. I think it's always interesting to hear everybody's story, right? Just the fascinating thing about the names of your kids, right? I mean, that's really good. And But I think the more we know about each other, the better we can understand each other and connect and all those type things, obviously.
Right.
But So I'm assuming since your dad was a preacher, your parents probably taught you the gospel.
Yes, sir. Was blessed to have been taught that from my youth, and uh, growing up now or as an adult, I often think about how blessed I am that there are many people they have no godly influence, and in studying and doing my work from time to time, I realize as studying maybe Leviticus or even Genesis, I'm not stumbling over the names, and some of that foundation was laid that makes it much easier, much more efficient as I study now. And that was not something I chose in my youth. It was something my parents chose to give to me. So that's definitely one of the among the greatest gifts that they have given to me, as Timothy had with his mother and grandmother. But I'm blessed to have grandparents. They've all died, but they were all Christians, and to have two parents who are Christians, as I grow, I realize more and more how much of a gift that was.
Yes.
And I was baptized when I was maybe 10 or 11, and as I grew, there were times where I wondered, well, how much do I remember? How much did I understand? And so when I was 18, then I talked to a gospel preacher named H.E. Phillips just about some of my questions. And so sometimes said I was baptized again, but of course that one with some more confidence of my own understanding
Yes.
of who the Lord was and what was expected of me.
Well, and I told you I would try to feed off of the things that I hear, and I think obviously, and you're right, the blessing that you had with family that you grew up. I mean, that was the world you grew up in,
Right.
and so many. I can't say that. All right, I didn't grow up in that world, and so you indeed are blessed. But it's also to help us to appreciate and understand those, like you said, that didn't grow up, the ones that you're out here trying to teach.
Right.
They can't relate at all to
Right.
you and what your life was like as a kid, and even if I'm studying with somebody, I said, well, let's turn to, let's say, 1 John 3:4 to see what
Exactly.
they don't have a clue where 1 John is,
No.
right, and it's just the baby steps that you have to take people through
Yes,
to get
that's
them up
right.
to get them up to that point. But tell us uh, tell us a little bit about the congregation there, if you would.
Sure. the Chena Small Tracks Church of Christ has been meeting since I think about the 60s. Interestingly enough, there were a few families. Alaska became a state, I believe, in 1959. And so there were a few families, young families in Florida that after the statehood, I think there were some unique opportunities for people who wanted to move here. So ironically, few families of Christians moved from Florida, came to Fairbanks.
Wow.
And they began the church here. And one of those families, the Kings, their daughter grew up and was raised here and married, and she and her husband are still here. And so when I was moved, the church here, we're about 30 in number, and about a third of that is children under 18. So for a small congregation, we have a good mix of age. We lack some in those who are older and mature, but that will always be a challenge to this area, because by the time many people get to older stage of life, Fairbanks is not a comfortable place, an easy place to live sometimes. And so the church has never had elders, not because of any desire not to, but just many times when people get into the latter phase of life, they go to be closer to family, or to a place that's just a little bit easier, where they don't have to shovel a few feet of snow and deal with some of the elements and such. So that'll also always be a challenge here. But the Lord can provide. When I moved here, one reason I moved here, the church had not had an evangelist in about 30 years. Again, just because the way I've said it is, there are some preachers who could move here, but just wouldn't be interested in this part of the world and the lifestyle here. God provides people for all different circumstances. There's some who would like to move here, but would not be able to be maybe so far from maybe aging parents, or maybe other health limitations. So I was just at a time in my life where that transition was going to be easier. So they invited us to move up, and we've been blessed to get to work alongside the saints here and their children, who are my children's age. That made that transition also a little bit easier. So we have a good age mix, and good energy and interest. And so I've been blessed to be with them for the past 4 years, a little over 4 years.
That's been one of the things that's been fascinating. So many things have been fascinating about interviewing everybody, because I need to do this sometime. Matt and I need to do it to see what states have we not covered yet. But we've interviewed people from New York to Florida to Texas to California to Washington, Canada, and that's one of the unique things about we're all the Lord's church. We're all part of the kingdom, and we're teaching the same truths, but every community is different. And,
right.
And
yes.
the way you do the work has a big impact on how, especially moving into the area,
right.
And to make that adjustment. And sometimes it can be, like you said, it can be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
I know that talking to Caleb Churchill in New York, I remember him talking about coming out of their apartment they live in. He said every day when he walks out of the apartment on the street, all the crowd that's walking by, and they're from all over the world.
Right.
You can imagine, you're not going to do that in Vestavia, Alabama. There's some of that, but not at that level.
Right.
And,
right.
And so most of the people, am I right? Most of the people that you would meet, are they from that area that you end up studying with, or do you have, how does that look on a daily basis?
There's a mix. A lot of Alaskans have come up for work, and so there's a mix of people from all over, mostly the states,
Okay.
some international, but you'll meet people, and often that's a conversation piece. What brought you to Alaska? Why are you here?
Yes,
And
yes.
so sometimes meet people who've been raised, and that just that question, even for me, is often an opportunity to tell them why I moved here, and I try to gauge their interest, but that lets me just introduce them. I moved here to work with a small church and kind of read their body language. How do they respond to that? Oh, you're teaching the gospel. That's great. Or they make no
Right.
comment, and doesn't mean I avoid the subject, but just move at a different pace. And
You
that
see
that
that?
has definitely been, like you said, moving. Every place is different. So by no means am I in the Bible Belt. Um, Alaska is very independent minded, and Texans, I wasn't born in Texas, but kind of consider myself from there. Texans are very independent minded, but as a stereotype, generally
Right.
conservative on the at least American scale of that.
Yes.
Alaskan independence is is not conservative; it's just very independent, and so you definitely do not make really any assumption, and I guess that's true in general, but the just the mix of convictions, uh, politically, socially, and of course spiritually, is very diverse here. So again, as you were saying, not often I am meeting people that would not know Joshua from John in the scripture, and so you start from ground zero, making uh, little to no assumptions about where you're going to be starting from.
Yeah, I just love that, and I like your phrase "mix of convictions." I don't know if I've ever heard that, but that makes sense with the environment and the makeup there of the community. Um, and again, I just find that a fascinating part of it. I mean, you go back and you read when the church started, and all the different areas when they would go on the various ones go on the missionary journeys. Every place they went, it was different, right? I
Right,
mean, it's just nothing's changed, but people are people. People have
right.
souls. People are lost. They need to hear the truth, and so. But now we've done that same thing. We moved here last year from Indiana to Alabama, and I've done that so many times. Wherever we are, I say, "Hey, we just moved here from Indiana.
Right,
Well,
right.
what in the world brought you here?" And I said, "I'm so glad you asked.
That's
Here,
right.
yeah, I've got some new cards. Let me share with you what I'm
Uh-huh.
doing." But it's so exciting. You know, tell us a little bit about, because our time goes so fast, but
I know it.
some of the things I looked at your website, and some of the things that y'all have been doing. The fairs, you did something at what's this school called? What is that? UAF? Tell everybody.
University
Go
the
ahead.
University of Alaska at Fairbanks.
University of Alaska at Fairbanks. Okay,
Yes.
I haven't heard that before. So tell everybody some of the things that you guys have been doing.
Sure. When I moved to Batesville, Arkansas, preached there for about 5 years, they were going to the local county fair. Usually most fairs, have a vendor section. And so they were going there, setting up a table, distributing uh, tracts and correspondence course and such things. And so that was my introduction to that kind of work. Uh, the church there also had a local newspaper article and gospel meetings and different efforts, which I appreciated that they were just doing everything they could. But I really enjoyed that opportunity of going to the fair. Um, it's the closest thing I can think of Acts 17, where Paul went to Athens and he went to the marketplace, a place where there were people who were there to mingle and to, a community gathering place, and where people would come to talk and to be talked to with that expectation. That's a challenge I find. Where do you go to find people? Um, and where can you go? You can't just walk through the aisles of Walmart and try to have conversations with people. That's not why they're there. And you might find someone who'd be willing to, but eventually probably a manager is going to ask you to leave.
Right.
People are not there for that purpose. And, try to be wise in the work. but a fair is a place, and if you're in the vendor section, people are there to see what do all these people have to offer, and they're there to talk. And so I really enjoyed that. It was a challenge. I learned every year, maybe a different way to set the booth up, or how do you get people to talk? Because as they're passing booth to booth, you've got about 2 seconds, 3 seconds to show or to do something to get them to stop. And of course, we're going to do the Lord's work, the Lord's ways we see in the book of Acts. So we're not passing out T-shirts and candies and such to gets people to stop. And so I learned a lot, and I just enjoyed the one-on-one opportunity to talk to people. I've done newspaper articles, and that's effective. People sometimes say, what's the best thing we can do in evangelism? And there is no silver bullet. The gospel is the silver bullet, but there's no method that I know of that is just, this is going to revolutionize everything. What we need to be doing is everything we can possibly do. So if we can do a newspaper article, if we can do a radio program, if we can go door to door, if we can go to a fair, just do everything that your time and financial resources let you do. And I believe the Lord just uses the combination of those. But I enjoy the one-on-one conversations that you can have. And so when I came to Fairbanks, we have long winters, short summers, just a few weeks of a fall and a spring. So because our summers are so short and it's a heavy tourist area, there's a lot of community events, and that they'll have a street fair. And so they open that up to vendors, their local artisans, and people offering food, of course. So they open that up also to churches, usually at a discount, because we're considered a nonprofit in the legalese. So I have really enjoyed that work. There's a state fair that runs 10 days, and that booth is 10 hours a day for 10 days. And so it's busy and exhausting in some ways. It goes from noon till 10 at night, but I have just enjoyed that opportunity. And then there's 2 or 3 other booths. My wife she helped last year to find there was a family day at a local park, and she contacted the people, and they let us come for free. They were happy to have us come. And so that is just, I can't say necessarily in conversions that this has just changed everything. Like I said, I don't know of anything that's like that, but I know it gets our face out into the community. Some people have sometimes criticized, well, we don't need to invite people to come to worship. That's just for Christians. We primarily meet to encourage each other. Yes. But again, let's do everything. Let's invite people to come visit us, and then let's go out and find them. Let's do it all instead of one or the other. But it's a challenge to find places. Where can you go and do that? And I have just found the local fairs and events where you're allowed to set up a table. I've heard of brethren even going to just a park and setting up in a public place or a coffee shop. That's good. But again, with the fair, people are there for the purpose of talking. You're not interrupting, someone's conversation at a business. So again, not criticizing those efforts. Let's do everything we can. But I like the setup of the fair. And we also have a radio program, and that's worked in tandem well, that the fair lets us let people know about that. And as we've been on the radio for a couple of years, in fact, last year at the fair, the very first day at the fair, a man walked up and he said, I heard your program yesterday. And I had, in part of that program, I had talked about church doesn't need to host social events. That's not the way the churches in the scripture spread the gospel. And he said, I had never thought about that, and I'm still thinking about it. And that I was thankful for that. It's not a live program, so I don't get immediate feedback. And so sometimes you just wonder, well, who's listening? Is anybody listening? And so I was thankful for the encouragement of knowing someone was listening, and someone heard something they had never been taught, and they were thinking about it. And that's what the fair also allows us to do. Again, have not had a huge number of conversions, but have had a lot of good conversations where I know I've planted the seed and been able to talk to people that it would be difficult to meet otherwise. And so we do what we do to please the Lord. We're not first chasing results, although we want as many fish in the net that the Lord will provide, of course. But I've learned to be thankful just for the opportunity to meet someone, to plant the seed, and trust God will provide other opportunities if there is someone who is diligently seeking him. Hebrews 11, verse 6.
So many things you said there. Thanks for sharing that. And I hope the people that are listening, you go, I wonder, what kind of fairs do we have? Do we have a county fair? Do we have,
Yes.
Sometimes people are oblivious to what's going on and don't even think about that. And, but I got to tell you a quick story since you brought that up.
Yes.
Our daughter married a fella from Brooklyn, New York. They went to school at Florida College, and they met there and fell in love, and they've been married for a long time now and got kids. And anyway, so when I first met him, I said, "Well, how did you learn the truth? Who taught you?" And so he starts telling me about, and this was in '64. I tell you how old I am. The World's Fair was in New York in '64.
Okay.
And I had some people that took me to New York first time to the World's Fair. So, but he was talking about his mom and dad lived in Brooklyn, and they went to the fair, and a booth was there at the World's Fair. And it was a Church of Christ that was there handing out pamphlets to people that were coming through.
Yeah.
And they stopped and talked to them, accepted it. And then the people followed up with them, and they studied, and they obeyed the gospel. So, so then Ted ends up obeying the gospel, and then he meets my daughter, and so that all started in a fair in New York.
Yeah. Wow.
Just so you never know, like you say, you're planting the seed of how those connections will be made. And the other thing I love is, and I want to commend you for this, and some of it is God given, but just you've got a good personality, and just for you to say you enjoy the one-on-one. So many people are scared to death, unfortunately, to talk to anybody. I know some are very shy, and
Sure.
but and then the fear factor that's out there with so many. Well, I'm afraid they will ask me something I don't know the answer to.
Right.
Well, let's get to know each other first, and but that's one of the things I spend so much time in trying to teach people how to do is to learn how to connect. And I'll say, do you have I don't know if you say mailman anymore, but do you have a mailman or mail person that's, that still comes to the house yeah. Well, do you know their name? No. Well,
Right.
that'd be a place to start with
Yes.
but it's just different things like that. And Matt's already given me the 5 minutes, if you can believe that.
All right. One other thing, let me add about the fair, I've also learned is it is just as good for us as it is for them.
Yes.
It gets the church busy. And of course, as the preacher, I have more time to go than anybody else, but others are involved. And the first time I did it, we had just a meeting at somebody's house to talk about what we were going to do. And there were people who said they were nervous. Well, what if I don't know the answer? This is a great way for someone who's not comfortable going door to door or whatever. Go with somebody and sit and listen, and your own strengths will come out in that. Jesus sent the apostles out 2 by 2. If there can be at least 2 people at the booth, that is ideal. But then when we work together, it's great for Christians to be together for any reason.
Yes.
If you're together watching the ball game, at least you're with a brother or sister. But when we're together working in spiritual things, the benefits of that just are even more. And so I've found it invigorates us. We're doing something. Sometimes I think they're sincere brethren. They want to do something and they don't know. This gives us a great direction, a great opportunity. We plan and then we do the work together. And then we have conversations afterwards. Well, somebody asked me this question I hadn't thought about before. And that's invigorating. And then one more thing, the women can do this work.
Yes.
This is not the women leading the assembly. And it dawned on me when I was at the university. I thought, after I'd done that a few months, I thought, it's mostly young men that stop by for obvious reasons. What college student wants to sit and talk to some balding 40-year-old guy at a table? And that got me thinking about these other places. We need women there because a woman is much more likely to stop and talk to women. And
Yes.
again, the work that women can do, the sky is the limit. They're limited in some time in their time as they're taking care of children, but husbands, take care of your children so your wife can go sit at the booth. There's just their personality and all of that God will use to have conversations that if you were there, somebody might not stop and talk to them. So I have just learned as I have done this, maybe even to refine my approach and the things that I do. But
Well,
our wives and the women can do so much there as well.
Oh yeah, what I find, and I love what you're saying because I talk about this a lot of the 2x2. But if you and I are working a booth together or working a table together, and we talk to somebody, if I've never done that, I'm going to school on you. You're teaching
Sure.
me. You're teaching me without. I mean, you're going to be intentional because Dan's never done this, and I'm going to help him.
Right.
But so then you bring me up to speed. You get me equipped, and next year I'm going to be there with somebody else that I'm going to be teaching how to do it. And no, I mean that's just so powerful. We're going to run out of time. Maybe we need to do this again sometime. But the conversion story. Tell me about somebody that maybe there's some unique situation of how you met them and how. Have you got one? Have you got a conversion story?
Sure, and it incorporates some of what we've talked about, but not everything. It isn't someone I met at a fair. In 2010, my wife and I had moved to Batesville, Arkansas. So we had just moved into a house, and we went for a walk down the street, and I had maybe just come back from the Philippines. My father goes to the Philippines about 4 times a year. And so we're walking down the street and notice this house has a sign that says Filipino parking only. So I don't know if you've seen those before. People will have, Crimson Tide parking only, Auburn Tiger parking only, something like that.
Yeah, right.
And so we thought, well, that's funny. We were in rural Arkansas, didn't expect to meet a Filipino there. And so we decided we just live down the street from them. Let's go knock on the door. And I don't know if you've met a lot of Filipinos, but they are just ultra friendly. And so the wife answered the door. She was Filipino. Her husband was American. That's pretty common. And so I think either on that occasion or maybe later, she invited us. They would have a Filipino Christmas party. So all the Filipinos in the area would get together and they would invite whoever they met. So my wife and I got there a little bit early. Or no, we were a few minutes late. When we got there was only one other couple there, and it was not the family we had met. So we were helping them set up, and my wife was working with the wife. So we stayed in touch with that family and spent a little bit of time with them. And she was a member of the Baptist church, but she was very spiritually minded in many ways. And so my wife primarily, along with another sister, Kim Henley, there were just conversations that arose that eventually led to a Bible study. It didn't start with a Bible study, but just spending time with them but eventually she had some questions and again, primarily my wife and another woman studied with her, and she had questions all across the board, but and she resisted. She didn't just take it all in and a yes to everything. She had questions and pushed back, but of course that's how she was learning and growing. And so eventually her name was Maureen, and she obeyed the gospel, and then she wanted, of course, her family in the Philippines to hear. And so my father was able to meet her father in the Philippines. And there were some devoted brethren over there that would go and talk to him and study with him. I wish that part had a happier ending, as we say. Don't believe her father ever obeyed the gospel, but again, there were just opportunities to plant seeds. And one other interesting part of that was, as she was getting to know my wife, Maureen, before she was a Christian, even, she invited my wife to her house. She was hosting. She would just invite all the Filipinos in the area to come to her house for a Bible study. So then she invited my wife to lead that class. And so I forget, once a month, maybe my wife was able to teach a group of anywhere from 5 to 10 people in that area. And my wife was wondering, why did she ask me and not, her pastor's wife? I don't know that we ever asked that question, but that just opened some doors. And of course, when Starla was teaching that class, Maureen didn't realize it, but she was trying to teach her as well. And so we remain in contact with her. She's a dear friend, and love her very much, of course.
You know what? Well, thanks for sharing that. And I do. We do a thing here, and I've done it other places. Call it Invite Sunday, and the idea is, well, that's at least there's one service a month that everybody knows that, well, we're going to have a lesson, and it's going to be geared toward those that are not members, and encouraging people to invite them to come.
Sure.
And always have a theme. And last year, the last part of the year, we did Do You Know My Jesus? And then this year we're doing What If? And that I just loved it, the what if. So it's like, to go back to your story there, what if, and if I mess up how you said, what if you had not met her, right? What if you had not gone to that, where the Filipino park, or where that party was, right?
Right.
If you had never met her, she would not be a sister in Christ today, probably. I mean, what if you didn't go to the fair? What if you didn't ask this person that you saw coming down the street? It's just all of those, the what if scenarios, I think, are just, I love that, because it's just, wow, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about what if I didn't invite her, because I did, she ended up obeying the gospel. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just
use our opportunities.
Yeah, the opportunities. Okay, we're almost out of time. All right, one thing. There's not just one thing, but somebody's watching this or listening, and David, you've got them excited. All right. So if they say, well, what do I have to do to lead others to Christ? What would be one thing that you would say to them that they need to do, or that they need to learn how to do, to start leading others to Christ?
It really does, and I'll feed off what you were saying earlier. The golden rule is one of the most evangelistic passages in the New Testament, if we're going to apply that principle. And so find a way to meet others, and again, don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. Well, what do I got to say? What's the first Bible verse, and all of that? Start with knowing their name. And it may be the person across the street. It may be a person at the fair. And what am I going to say first? Just be a neighbor, and wait for God to provide an opportunity. And so just do what you're able. The second greatest commandment, love your neighbor as yourself, and do unto others as others have done unto you.
Yes.
Not the exact wording of the verse, but we've all learned the gospel because someone cared about us. If we were blessed with a father or mother, a spouse who taught us when we were younger, as in your case, but someone has taught you the gospel. And so just let that weigh on your conscience, and you can't do what others can do. And it doesn't matter, because 1 Corinthians 12, where I'm a fingernail and you're a hair. We're not all supposed to do what others are doing. We can learn from each other, but just look for a way.
Yes.
Find a way. Meet the person who delivers the mail, or we have little cards that talk about our radio program. And from time to time, I encourage people, if you're not comfortable, you don't feel like you're real outgoing, then just leave it with your tip at the table, And I've found I don't have an ultra outgoing personality. I've just learned to push myself some, but I've just found when we start to do something, then we learn to do a little bit better and to do it a little bit more. And so just start somewhere and do something because you love your neighbor and because others have done that for you. I think that'll weigh on our conscience and that will push us, challenge us, and motivate us ultimately, not because we love our neighbor the most, but because the first great commandment that we love our God with our heart, soul, and mind. And so we want to use our strength to serve him.
So good. Thank you. Thank you for that. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, David, have you got contact information that you'd be willing to share?
Oh, of course. Either through the church's website, chinachurch.com, or Facebook, or anybody can reach me by email. The church's email is chinachurch@gmail.com, or you can email me personally, davidhalbrook@hotmail.com.
Okay. All right. Listen, thank you for doing this. I mean, I can't thank you enough. So, and thank your bride too for allowing spare some time or share some time with us. And the kids, can they see you if they're up, or what time is it there?
8:15. I heard someone stirring and I figured they'd hear me talking and come up here, but
they probably, what's Daddy doing out there? Who's he talking to? Who's he talking to? All right. And I understand, don't you have a gospel meeting coming up with somebody that you know pretty well that's going to be holding a meeting?
There was a hitchhiker coming through town, Ron Halbrook, so we asked him to stay. My father's coming. See, today's Friday, so Wednesday we're gonna start the meeting on Wednesday through Sunday, and it's on some hot button issues. It's going to be on covering abortion and homosexuality, transgenderism, social media, pornography, and then being young in age and strong in faith. And so we need these topics. Our children, you wish a kid could just be a kid, but our children somebody's going to introduce them to these topics. I'd rather it be a Christian. And so we're going to strengthen our faith and try to reach others with these challenges that like it or not are there.
The world's a mess right now. It always has been. I just think
that's right.
Because of technology, we just hear everything from everywhere.
That's right.
And but anyway, brother, thank you again. Tell your dad hi, by the way. And we need to interview him sometime. So talk to him. Tell him,
okay,
plant that seed.
I'll be happy to, and could even do it while he's here. But I'll let you work on the schedule.
And Starla too. We're going to talk to her at some point.
That'd be great.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And
thank you. Send my love to the brethren there. Of course, the church there has shared in my work, I think, for about a year. So send my thanks to the saints
and
there.
I certainly will. And they've started putting the podcast in their bulletin, the standard, they call it. So whenever this is posted, everybody will get a chance to listen to it. So that's your way of being able to say thanks to them. So,
and that's one other unique part I should have mentioned. I won't take a whole lot more time, but I'm helped by a variety of churches and individuals who are helping me, and in worldly sense, it's of no benefit to them. I'm not there helping the church there to grow, but a lot of people have prayed for and encouraged us and helped us in a lot of ways. I certainly know I'm not here by my own strength in so many ways. So that's been a special part of the work here, of so much generosity from a lot of people to send us here to help us be here. So the Lord has
thank you.
Blessed us.
Thank you for expressing that, because people need to hear that too. They need to hear that. And all right. Well, again, thank you. And Lord willing, we'll get to meet face to face sometime.
I hope so, brother.
One thing I do like about you, I like your hairstyle.
Ready or not, here it comes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just had to do that. But anyway, if we can't laugh every now and then, it's sad, right? We have to be able.
Right. That's right.
All right. All right. Well, thanks again, brother.
Thank you, brother. Happy to be
Yes,
with
sir.
you.
Bye-bye.
Melt my heart and fill my life. Give me one soul today. Give me one soul today.